It's Super Bowl week, but the Steelers are still in the news. They're going to play a game during the 2025 season in Dublin. Now, we don't know when quite yet. We also don't know their opponent. We'll find that information out later this spring. But if you want to get on that action when that game is announced or the Super Bowl this weekend, BetOnline.ag is the place to do it. They are today's presenting sponsor of the show. Remember, though, talking about the Steelers in Dublin, Steelers' late, great chair, Dan Rooney, served as the U.S. ambassador from 2009 to 2012 under the Obama administration. So there are ties between Ireland and the Steelers. So it's very exciting news here on Bleav in Steelers. If you want to get in on any of the Super Bowl action, though, too, ton of props. We'll talk about some here on today's show with today's guest. BetOnline.ag is the place to do it. Head over to BetOnline.ag to get on the action today. BetOnline, the game starts here. Welcome into Bleav in Steelers. My name's Mark Bergin. It's Friday. Super Bowl Sunday is days away. We are almost there. I am stoked to welcome in today's guest. He is one and only Joey Christopoulos. You're everywhere now in Chicago, man. It's like WLS, CHGO. It's good to see you again, my friend.
What's up, Mark? Happy Super Bowl. This is now kind of a tradition, right? I think we definitely did last year's Super Bowl together. We might have done the year before, so happy holidays.
All right.
Great to go back.
Yeah, before we get into the Super Bowl, one Steelers bit I got to get to. I've seen these conflicting reports of Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith, the OC, wasn't letting Russ cook and wasn't letting him audible at the line of scrimmage. Russell Wilson's also a pending free agent, and it's like, oh, Arthur Smith didn't let him do that after the Week 13 win over Cincinnati, and Russ had a career day, 400-plus yards. I'm just going to leave it here, Joey. I think it's somewhere in the middle, and this story is purely of the access of, if you're a reporter, okay, Arthur Smith is my source versus if you're a reporter, Russell Wilson is your source. I think the answer between this disconnect, if you will, it's somewhere in the middle. That's what I think. What say you, though, considering Russ is a free agent?
Couple things about it. I mean, unfortunately, this feels like a familiar narrative with Russell Wilson. Just a little bit. I mean, if you wanted to read any of the old articles from the Seattle Seahawks of what they didn't let Russ do and what he was allowed to get away with and all that stuff, and it feels a little bit of the ifs and buts, candies and nuts, a little bit about letting Russ cook, and that disconnect. I mean, look, we can all be pretty honest and transparent here about the Steelers offense last year, that it was basically run, moonball. Run, moonball. They got Freiermuth involved a little bit, but towards the end of the season, that kind of dissipated and went away. Unfortunately, this feels a little bit more. I don't want to side with Arthur Smith on this one because he's the easy whipping post and whipping boy for Steelers fans everywhere, offensive coordinators, the same way that the Chicago Bears always go after the offensive coordinator. But, man, Russell Wilson, man, I mean, at some point, how do you not take ownership? You're a veteran. Let me cook, all that different stuff. I mean, it just feels like more excuse-making on Russell Wilson's part, in my opinion.
I think both sides are leaking what information they want to media members. I don't blame Russell Wilson. He's trying to renegotiate a contract, if not Pittsburgh, maybe Vegas in a reunion with Pete Carroll. I'm on record saying that the Steelers should try to re-sign Justin Fields and go from there, regardless of what they do. They can't end up empty-handed, whether it's Wilson or Fields, but whichever guy it is, Joey, to me, they're a bridge for whoever is next in subsequent off seasons. I don't think you're going to get that quarterback of the future in this off season. That's where I come down on that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, what stinks about the Russell Wilson situation, right, is that there was a tantalizing month when things were rocking and rolling, when he played really well. I mean, him against the Steelers, like, that's one of the best quarterback performances I've seen from a Pittsburgh Steeler quarterback in quite some time.
The Cincinnati game in Week 13, he had 414 yards, and it was like, oh my gosh, turn back the clock, find the fountain of youth, if you will.
Yeah, stir the echoes to the Ben Roethlisberger era of 15, 16, 17. It really is that long. But unfortunately, things kind of shored up a little bit, and you can ask yourself the question: do things like, of course, if you go on to BetOnline.ag, who's the betting favorite right now to land Cooper Kupp? I think the Steelers are a plus 500. They're right at the top.
He hasn't had an 1,000-yard season, though. It's like you're getting a Band-Aid to cover a flesh wound there, Joey.
Right, and it just leads to the question of, let's say you do draft Emeka Egbuka. Let's say you do go out and trade for a Cooper Kupp. Let's say you do surround Russell Wilson with all these different weapons. I wasn't necessarily seeing him try and force the ball or throw a perfect pass to Van Jefferson and he was dropping it, right? Or Calvin Austin was the problem last year. I do think it had a little bit to do with Russell Wilson's decision making. And it was kind of that I'm going deep down the field, or I'm checking the ball down, or we're running the football. Again, it just kind of harkened back to some of those similarities that I think are frustrating for Steelers fans. So I'm with you, man. I mean, if you want to take a look at Justin Fields, talk about letting a guy cook. He'd at least let him throw a few passes from time to time. But perhaps
that didn't happen in Chicago.
Well, I mean, it did, right? But I mean, again, if that's the kind of style of football that you want to play, that's fine. Like, you limit Justin Fields to 17 to 20 pass attempts. You lean very, very heavily on your punt and run your game. And then obviously you use him and utilize him in RPO and you run him too as well. So look, Emeka Egbuka paired with Justin Fields, that's a great offseason storyline of those two guys going back to the Clemson game. You can kind of play that out a little bit. So, I mean, I don't know. It's a rock and a hard place, unfortunately, for Pittsburgh right now. Do you? I don't want to get off topic here, but do you have a door? Is there a door number 3 for you? Is there a Justin Fields, Russell Wilson door number 3?
No, because I listened to what the owner Art Rooney says. They'll walk away with one of them between the two, whether it's Russ or Fields. Russ is going to be 36 years old. If you're allocating, I don't know, let's say 20, 25, $30 million per year, you've got north of $50 million in salary cap space. Well, that limits your ability to then go out and try to sign other difference-making players that this roster desperately needs right now. And I know the Steelers can get creative and have veterans sign deals that can free up more cap space and all of that. But the reality is both quarterbacks outperform their contract. Less than $5 million combined, both of them made this past year. So then when you actually have to spend that money on other key upgrades to this roster, you're not going to be able to do that. I don't think that there's a world where either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields isn't a Steelers quarterback in 2025. I would go after Fields because he is younger.
And what does in your opinion, what do you think the money would be like for Justin Fields? In my opinion, I can't envision it exceeding $20 million a year. So if you're a Steelers fan and you want to wrap your head around that, if you can get Justin Fields right in the, let's just say, the $15 to $20 million area for a quarterback, that's still a bargain from NFL standards. And now you can maybe talk yourself into just throwing a name out there. What if you could pair him with a big body receiver like a T. Higgins? Because you need help at that position. Or what if it is Pickens and Egbuka moving forward, that kind of thing? But what would Justin Fields, what would you pay him?
I know a lot of it. I think you're right on the money there in Joey. I hope the other Yinzers are listening to this right now. We need to get you in the front office because it's like the receiver position. This is music to my ears, my friend, because outside of George Pickens, there was a lot to be desired from that position group this past year. And you swung and missed on Roman Wilson, at least as a rookie. He hardly played, and the production was not there point blank from the other guys.
Do not bank on that. Yeah.
So I think the salary is spot on, the receiver position, and that's where it's like, I've heard the rumblings of, trade George Pickens. It's like, so great. We're creating an even greater talent discrepancy at that position group. There are some talented receivers in free agency this year. I think that's a position group the Steelers definitely need to upgrade. They never really replaced Deontay Johnson. Again, someone to complement George Pickens. George Pickens, here's another thing to keep an eye on. We'll get to the Super Bowl. Pickens is entering the final year of his rookie deal. If I were advising him or if I were George Pickens, I don't think I would play in the final year of my rookie deal to say, let's work out a new contract now. Could he be leaving some money on the table? Perhaps. But he is vastly outperforming his rookie contract. And this team without him, good luck to see how that was. The 3 games where he didn't play, the Steelers went 1-2. This offense was dormant without him. So if I were advising him, I'd say, look, man, let's get out ahead of the free agent market. And maybe you're leaving a little bit of money on the table, but you get that guarantee of the premium that you're going to make once you're on an open market. That's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, my only thing with that though is unfortunately, this is going to be kind of a broad statement, but I feel like that there's no nuance with these NFL contracts anymore. You know what I mean? Where I don't think I think George Pickens is a wide receiver one in the NFL. Do not get me wrong, but I don't think George Pickens is going to go out there and make Jamar Chase money, and that's probably what he's going to want. There's no nuance with these NFL contracts anymore, where everyone just wants to reset the market and get paid the one penny more than everybody else. So I'm not saying he's not a $30 million a year wide receiver. He's definitely a $20 to $22 million wide receiver. And I wonder where the gap in that, in his own mindset with his agency kind of lands. And maybe that's a sticking point with the Steelers. But I hear you. Get in front of it. If you want to commit and be in business with George Pickens, this is the offseason to do it. And if you're saying to yourself, we got a lot of production out of him. He's mercurial, to say the least. And if you wanted to cash in on that, this is probably that pivot point in the offseason either way.
Well, the same thing happened with Deontay. We got to get to Super Bowl, though.
Let's do
it. You're the guest, Joey. So if you want the first or second pick, the choice is yours. We're going to go through the top Super Bowl storylines. Chiefs, Eagles, Sunday. You want the first or the second pick? You're the guest. You start here. But you want
I'll do the pick? Yeah, I'll do the first one. I'll go first, and I think we're going to kind of maybe lead up to the most important storyline. So I'm going to go with one that I think is kind of.
You want to go reverse order?
I was going to go reverse order and T.
I have to recalibrate my brain, but okay. All right, we'll do it. Let's do it.
So here's the one. The one that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, and the one that I'm really, really interested in is the Kansas City wide receiver group. And here's how I want to phrase this is, you have your Xavier Worthies, you got your Hollywood Browns. It's a little bit, and of course, Travis Kelce, right? And who's going to step up in this game? And in my personal opinion, one of the players that I think anyone is talking enough about is DeAndre Hopkins in this game. DeAndre Hopkins has done nothing in this postseason. DeAndre Hopkins has had some good games with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's disappeared at times. Looks he's a little bit older as a wide receiver. A lot of people could say that he's long on the tooth and he's not going to factor in this game. I'm going the exact opposite way. For a guy, DeAndre Hopkins is like tailor-made for a Super Bowl game when he's fully rested, all the time in the world, and you're going to have a defensive line with Vic Fangio that's going to try and be exotic and change things up and throw these different looks at Patrick Mahomes. And who is the one guy that's going to be the perfect safety blanket? I don't think it's going to be Travis Kelce in this game. I think it's going to be DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins just reeks of that Cooper Kupp Super Bowl, where I looked on BetOnline.ag. You're asking what our favorite props were. One of my favorite ones were most targets in the game. I think DeAndre Hopkins is like 15, 16 to 1. I mean, I would throw a little bit of money down on that, right? I could see him giving a game of like 9 catches, 80 yards, 12 targets, maybe a touchdown. But I just think he's an incredible receiver. He has been for many years. I don't think he's not the player that he once was, but with 2 weeks off, fully refreshed, nobody talking about him. I'm wondering who steps up from this Kansas City Chief wide receiver room, and I'm going with DeAndre Hopkins.
Sounds like Fanny Pack Fangio is going to have his hands full, Joey.
Oh, the Fang. the Fang bringing it, man. Well, look, I mean, they got to try and do something, right? And it's about getting Patrick Mahomes off his spot and probably trying to have them work through an adjustment period in the game so they're not as lethal. I mean, at some point, I think the Chiefs are going to figure it out. They're going to do a trick play and all that good stuff. But I don't know. I think DeAndre Hopkins, those quick little turnarounds, those quick little catches, 6-7 yards, get him involved and then try and run the speed left to right. I think it's a formula.
It's the biggest game of his career, no doubt. And do you see that? Like Sean Payton bought the Chiefs receivers dinner the other night. Did you see this clip? It was just odd. He's like, Sean, do you realize that they play in your division? They're out somewhere, all the Chiefs receivers. And he's like, and I just had to buy them dinner. Andy should have brought them the credit card, but I just decided to buy them dinner. And I know the Super Bowl's in New Orleans. I know Sean Payton has a long history there, but it was just like, are you trying to recruit one of the Chiefs receivers onto your team next year? It was just
buy him some nuggies. Get him some nuggies at the table.
Strange. It was strange. All right. Let me go here. If we're going to keep it in the receivers, AJ Brown reading on the bench. Is he going to have Inner Excellence by Jim Murphy? And I love how AJ Brown reading this book on the bench, like, then led to this book being a bestseller. Like, is this type of behavior going to be allowed? what type of game A.J. Brown has, how that pairs with Jalen Hurts. Because remember where it was like, they were asking him earlier this year what needs to improve, and he just goes, the passing game, passing. It was like a 1 or 2 word answer. You talk about DeAndre Hopkins for the Chiefs. I kind of liken that to, okay, on the other side of the ball, that's A.J. Brown for the Eagles.
100%. And what's so funny about this Eagles team, and I think what makes sports so fascinating and great, is that this is one of those sliding door situations. If the Philadelphia Eagles beat Patrick Mahomes and win the Super Bowl, for years now, we're going to go back and, just like you said, look at all the quirks of A.J. Brown reading a book on the sideline, and we're going to chalk it up to some sort of weird science formula that made them Super Bowl champions. If they lose this game, we are going to go back and forensically canvass this Philadelphia Eagles team and pick apart all the little things that never really quite lined up, from the head coach and his situation with other coaches and players on the sideline during games, his weird interactions post-game, to, is Jalen Hurts, how's his knee, his relationship with A.J. Brown, all this different stuff. So it really is going to go one way or the other, and it's going to service whatever narrative that you want to have, just solely based on whether they win this game. But you're 100% right. Like, I'm, not to give away my pick, but the reason I am leaning Chiefs right now is because I just don't think Jalen Hurts is the quarterback that he was 2 years ago when he played this very same Kansas City Chiefs team. And I do think that is one of those X factors that's going to maybe be a separator in this game. He is going to have to lean on A.J. Brown exclusively in this pass game. And I think they're going to have to force feed him. Again, BetOnline, most targets in the game. I think A.J. Brown was at the top of that list at plus 400, leading the pack. So I'm with you, but it's really interesting, right? Like, that book is either going to be a bestseller come Monday, or it's going to be burned in the streets in Philadelphia. It's one or the other, Mark.
Like, if they win, maybe they burn it as well. It's the new Crisco in Philadelphia. It's like, I don't know, man. Like, I'll say this: if they win, maybe I need to read the book myself, Joey. But
that's how razor thin this is.
This is a guy, though, who's absolutely eaten the Pittsburgh Steelers alive when the Steelers have played the Eagles. So I have no doubt of A.J. Brown's talent and his ability. The next pick, however, my friend, is yours.
Okay, so I'm going to one of the biggest Super Bowl storylines is, I gotta say, man, Andy Reid. This is a huge storyline, in my opinion. If I'm getting this correct, I think just by playing the Super Bowl game, he surpasses Bill Belichick all time in postseason games coached. If he wins the Super Bowl, that is now, 5 for him? Is that correct?
In terms of appearances.
Yeah, in terms of appearances, it'd be his 4th Super Bowl win.
Yes.
And that is, look,
as a head coach, Super Bowl appearances as a head coach, just to be fully transparent with the people watching and listening.
Yeah. So, look, it's a hallowed hall. It's a pantheon. And you start to really kind of drill into, is this guy, I think we can start having maybe the Bill Belichick versus Andy Reid greatest coach of all time conversations. Now, of course, Bill Belichick has 7 Super Bowls. That's going to be one of the big sledgehammers in that debate, if you want to have it. But I just think this puts him into a pantheon that is going to. It's hard to get to this point. It really is, and I think he's a guy who, obviously, I think he's already said that he's going to come back and coach next year. Of course, if they win a Super Bowl, they're going to come back and try and put it all together and keep this dynasty rolling right now. But I think we talk a lot about greatness surrounding this game. We talk about also the narrative factor of Andy Reid and the Philadelphia Eagles. If he gets another Super Bowl, I just think it puts him on one of those untouchable pantheons where when they run the montage and it's Tom Landry, Vince Lombardi, Bill Belichick, Bill Parcells, there is no way that montage cannot have Andy Reid in it moving forward.
Yeah, he might be in the Mount Rushmore of coaches if they go on and win this game. I'm not even going to say might, because a three-peat's never been done when it comes to Super Bowls. I wonder, he's a pretty likable guy. I wonder, though, because of his coaching history in Philly as well, if there's any animosity or bad blood that he still has for how his tenure ended in Philadelphia. It was largely successful, but they could never quite get over the top, something he's done multiple times.
Numerous times.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Look. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go for it. No, I'm pulling up his coaching record just to be sure. But yeah, no, you can keep going. I mean, look, I think the way that ended was, it's just one of those weird things. Like, I'm sorry not to make a Chicago and not to make a baseball example, but it's like Joe Madden. Joe Madden came to Chicago, won a World Series with the Chicago Cubs, and for some reason by 2019, it had already like played itself out. There was already some sort of version of fatigue or redundancy, and I can understand how stagnation in sports can kind of be, a malnutrition, if you want to, towards future success. Clearly, once they let him go, 9 days later, the Kansas City Chiefs, swooped him up. And then, of course, Patrick Mahomes comes in. The rest is history. We can always have that conversation. The coach is always going to be connected to the great player, right? If he never gets the great player, do either of those have the type of success that they want to? But, man, I just think it's really impressive. And we're going to have a little bit more of a conversation about this, I think, as we move forward with our biggest storylines in this game. But we have such a weird relationship with greatness in sports in America. And sometimes it's either this thing that we completely obsess over, dissect and drill into, or we completely cast it off and not even really pay it its mind. And in my opinion, Andy Reid is kind of flying under the radar here of, if he wins this Super Bowl, I don't think we talk enough about his name with the TM, the trademark of greatness among NFL coaches.
I'm going to go a little bit off the board with my next pick. Tom Brady announcing the Super Bowl.
Oh,
I'm going to say this. I miss Greg Olsen in the booth. I do think Tom Brady has gotten better throughout the course of the season. But in prime time, in the biggest game, can he deliver? I mean, he delivered as a Super Bowl winning quarterback for years. But $375 million for his services as an announcer, I'm going to have my eyes on it and say, hey, has there been market improvement from the start of the season, which was really shaky, to this point in time? You need the reps, but that's something where I'm not going to lie to you, Joey, and this is not a knock on Tom Brady. It's not, but I miss Greg Olsen in the booth for games like this because I know that he would deliver.
What has been the rap on Tom Brady so far this year is that he's almost been over-prepared, where he comes in with stuff already in the chamber and isn't really experiencing the game authentically and sincerely in the moment, and then diagnosing and dissecting in a way that is entertaining and informative at the same time. It is something that Greg Olsen from the jump absolutely crushes every time he's in front of a microphone. I think Tom Brady has gotten better as the season has gone along. But again, for me, the thing that I'm very curious about when we talk about Tom Brady is, how does he necessarily handle Patrick Mahomes in this game and moving forward? 100% he's got to be thinking about, if Patrick Mahomes wins his third straight Super Bowl and gets a fourth on there before he's 30 years old, how does he handle that? He will handle it, I think, with a smile and a version of humor of like, I don't know about you, Kirk, but I'm getting scared, or something like that, right? But like, how does he handle it? Does it come off a little goofy? Does it come off a little canned or a little scripted? Can he be authentic in this moment? Especially because I do think we're going to get a close game. And I think that it is going to come down to, as they say, those 3, 4, 5 plays. And I'm not talking about big touchdowns or whatever. It could be a 3rd and 12 that gets converted. It could be a penalty. It could be a turnover. It could be anything. I think it will come down to something along those lines, something very similar to how they played the game a couple of years ago. So how does he handle those big moments? And as you said, can he dissect? Can he inform? And for me also, with your Greg Olsen point, can he entertain? That's a really interesting storyline. And man, Fox paid a lot of money for him.
Yeah.
So time to deliver. This is a big game. This is Tom Brady's Super Bowl for broadcasting for sure.
Definitely, man. All right, let's do 2 more each. We're up against time today, unfortunately. Yeah. Let's go 2 more picks each, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, cool. If we're going to do 2 each, one of them really quickly for me is that So I can't tell personally. I've been working in sports now since 2019. And I can't really tell if this is something where I'm too little inside baseball with this or whether it actually has become a normal thing. But I felt like, for years, we always talk about the big stars heading into the game, and we would always forget about the offensive line and defensive line. I feel like that narrative has actually been broadcasted appropriately, and I do feel like a lot of people have been talking about that heading into this game. My thing with this one is I actually give the slight edge, perhaps maybe on both sides of the ball. Maybe it's a net neutral defensive line-wise to the Philadelphia Eagles. I think the Philadelphia Eagles have the slight edge offensive line-wise, and it's either a net neutral or a slight edge defensive line-wise. So when you look at that, sometimes that is the marker and the separator to give a team an edge to possibly win the Super Bowl. Having said that, I am really curious, and my biggest storyline is how does Spags, defensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs, how does he continuously adjust to the Saquon Barkley factor in this game? And can he create enough back and forth through 4 quarters that eventually will slow it down? I think Saquon's going to have a strong start. I think he's going to have a strong first half. It's going to be a game of adjustments, but then at the end, can Spags make enough adjustments to slow it down? And can the Philadelphia Eagles maintain that Barkley momentum for 4 quarters? I think it's a huge storyline.
All right, let me piggyback off this. Jalen Carter dealing with flu symptoms. Hopefully he's 100% and ready to go for the Super Bowl because he is a force up front for Philly. You mentioned the offensive line. This is something that drives me nuts with the Chiefs. Their right tackle, I swear, is lined up a full yard into the backfield on every single play, and they get away with it. It drives me crazy watching them. Like, if I were an opposing head coach, I would just be screaming at the referee the whole game. Watch it when you watch the Super Bowl on Sunday. The Eagles, though, the tush push, what they're able to do, controlling the line of scrimmage at the point of attack, how they're able to convert short yardage situations. I'll parlay this into my pick. You mentioned a little bit with Saquon Barkley. It's his birthday on Super Bowl Sunday as well. I think the only thing stopping Saquon would either be Saquon himself or if Nick Sirianni in the Eagles coaching staff said, hey, we're into a game situation where we're going to stop giving him the football for whatever reason. Don't do that, because when he's averaging more than 6 yards per carry this postseason, nearly 6 yards per carry in the regular season, the only person stopping him is yourself. And I know that even if it's not successful early on, because Kansas City's defense is stout, but they have to keep feeding Saquon. I think that's a huge key for the Eagles to come out victorious in the Super Bowl.
I think that's a great point, because on top of it, too, I think the biggest mistake opponents make against the Kansas City Chiefs is they start panicking. The Kansas City Chiefs never panic. They continuously just do.
Been there. It's because they've been there. Yes, sorry,
No, you're 100%. Yeah, you're 100% right, man. I mean, they just never panic. So if you're down in the game and Saquon Barkley is your best player, keep giving him the football. I'm going to throw out my final best Super Bowl storyline is a guy named Patrick Mahomes, Mark. And here's the thing about it. This is my quick little rant while we're running out of time. This is America, and we love our sports, but we have a really strange, weird relationship with greatness. America, all we ever want is the best, the brightest, all the time. We want greatness all the time. But when we get greatness shown in front of our face, we then cast it aside like we are too good for it around here. And I have to be honest with you. It is so funny when I'm having conversations with people in the streets, online, on Twitter. It is more about why they can't stomach to see the Kansas City Chiefs continue to win, instead of, is Patrick Mahomes going to continue one of the greatest runs we've ever seen in NFL history? And for me personally, I'm glad that I'm breathing air into my lungs to see something like this, because it's been since the 90s when I was a little kid, when Dallas was racking up those back-to-back Super Bowls, and the Broncos did back-to-back in the late 90s. That's some impressive stuff. They're going for 3 in a row. Patrick Mahomes is trying to win his 3rd straight Super Bowl. I'm not like rooting for it full-throated, but I'm rooting for it because I love greatness. And for some reason, America loves greatness, but when it's put on their plate in front of them, they go, send it back to the kitchen. I don't get it.
Joey wants a steak medium rare. He wants a steak medium rare.
It's not bloody enough. Yeah. Overcooked.
And guess what, Joey? Those same people are still going to watch. I mean, this game is going to do astronomical numbers Part of that is the teams that got in, but people say that they don't want it. But when it actually comes to the eyeballs and the attention that it garners, that was my top pick, is the the Chiefs three-peat. And there are several others too. Things we did not get to that I briefly want to make mention of. And again, we're up against time here for people watching and listening to the show here. Travis Kelce, it's like, is he going to propose Taylor Swift after the game if they win? I don't know if he can host SNL again. Is it his last game? I think that's a possibility. We could probably have a whole podcast just on the officiating alone about these two teams, but that is for another show. We mentioned a little bit about Jalen Hurts' journey to Super Bowl in New Orleans, the site of other Super Bowls, but also coming off the New Year's Day attack, the terrorist attack that left 14 people dead as well, Joey. So it's like, what security is going to be like heightened in advance of this event on a big
they lost power. They lost the last Super Bowl was 49ers Ravens in the Superdome, and they lost power briefly. So
so you've got that, and then Kendrick Lamar at halftime, if he's going to go after Drake at all too. So I mean, you got the commercials that we could have 2 more hours of discussion about all of the Super Bowl storylines. But Joey Christopoulos, you're the absolute tops. I want to thank you. If there's anything that you need to plug with what you're doing over in the Windy City, the floor is yours.
If you're in the Midwest area and you got the right frequency in your car, WLS AM 890, Saturdays 8 to 9 o'clock. I host a 1-hour show, and also I'm now part of CHGO Sports. You can follow us at CHGO Sports or CHGO Bears. If you want to get your NFC North on, knock yourself out. Other than that, Mark, man, great to see you, brother. Thank you so much for having me. Can't wait to do it again.
He's the one and only Joey Christopoulos. Check him out over at WLS and CHGO Sports. My name is Mark Bergin. This is another edition of Bleav in Steelers. We'll be with you at some point after the Super Bowl, probably breaking down the Super Bowl recap, and then as storylines happen with the Pittsburgh Steelers this offseason, keep it here on the Bleav in Steelers show. I want to thank today's presenting sponsor, BetOnline, Apple and Spotify, 5 stars and 5 stars only. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button on the Mark Bergin YouTube page. Thanks again to Joey Christopoulos. My name is Mark Bergin. I'll see you next week. Until then, take care. So long, everybody.